I wanted to spend a little bit of time on thinking about Bloom's taxonomy on the learning process. So what's nice about, I cover a little bit more about Bloom in the blog post, but as an educational psychologist, he worked on a theory called mastery-based learning. And so what were the steps required to master a particular skill? There are definitely things that mastery is required, things such as fundamentals, like being able to function within society, things that you require before you can, go on to be creative or go on to create something. Actually, creation is the highest level of the thinking skills in Bloom's taxonomy. But just understanding the different tiers and kind of like what is the transition to each step of it was what Bloom tried to do. As I was reading it, I was thinking a little bit more about engineering education as well as kind of the differences between, good tests and tests that, I never, even if a student prepared for it, they would leave the test not understanding. Since so many students are motivated to only pass the test, it's kind of critical to have good tests that really test the students at all levels of this particular hierarchy, in my opinion. So how I read the tables is first, I stated the first one, the transition between lower order thinking to higher order thinking, that's called the learning process. The next is that you can kind of pair some things. So there's another table that you can read the blog, but knowledge is basically, we can test knowledge by gauging what the student remembers. And so an example of that is in this particular test, which you can also download from the blog. You can take a look. So remembering something just means that they know the titles, they know they did flashcards. And so in this part of the test, I have them labeling what each of these particular schematics are. And so all they have to do is remember. But the next step is when the student understands, so comprehension. So you can test comprehension by testing understanding. And so where we move into that, in the very beginning, I have some true-false questions. I like true-false questions, only I use them as a way to frame a particular section of the test. So it's just kind of sets the tone. Because they're 50-50, I don't put a lot of weight in them. I don't try and trick the students. But it is really a way I do like a framing. They might be give me's, but it's a mindset. I'm trying to get the student into a particular mindset before they move into the next section of the test. So, but really where comprehension comes is when we start to describe the differences. And so, show us that you understand this by describing. And so more free response types of things. The next one is application. And so you can test application by asking the student to apply their knowledge and their comprehension. So not only do they need to understand the memorization part of it, but they also have to know the underlying components. And so in this case, this is actually a good, the first part of it is comprehension, but the second part of it is more of analysis. So based on the schematic symbol, can you guess what this component, what component function it represents, and what do you think this does? So, in the very beginning, there's a diode and there's a light emitting diode, designated by these arrows. Well, this one is, this is a diode that looks just like this, and it's receiving light. So what I want the student to do is to kind of go through and think about what does this mean, and what is this component. So the next step from this is application and analysis kind of go hand in hand a bit, but we wanted the student to apply their knowledge here, but now we want the student to start to analyze. And so you test analysis by asking them and by witnessing their analytical process. And so this is where I put in a schematic that looks different than the schematic symbols than the ones that they learned before. I could have been a lot easier and used the exact same ones, but I really wanted to, kind of stretch their understanding. They're not going to have the same symbols every single time. So here I have them. We start off with some easy ones. So identify how many resistors, what are transistors. So basically, we're asking them to comprehend and to comprehend the symbol as well as apply the correct name for it. So they have to pull in some of their memorization, you know. And then I ask them, a comprehension question. Are there transistors in the circuit? And they have to analyze, use that comprehension to do some analysis. And if so, what type? And so this symbol does look different than the transistor symbol that they had before, and it was done slightly deliberately because I wanted to expose them to different ways of writing the symbols. So, but this is where we kind of move to the next portion of it, and this is synthesis. And so synthesis is really, synthesis is really the only way you can really test this is by asking the student to restate or evaluate or rephrase something in their own words. And that's where I'm asking them, like, what do you think the circuit is doing? They should have had some basic electricity classes. Even if they don't know what the circuit is doing and they don't quite understand what it's doing, I will still want them to make a good best estimate. And so then I have some more application-based questions, and then with a little bit of synthesis in here where I give them the components, but they have to connect them together and remember what all of the different components are and their respective schematics and how they go together. But where we reach the higher levels of Bloom's hierarchy is really in the evaluation, and the only way you can really move to this is the best way to test the highest level is by asking the student to create something. And so creation requires all of these lower levels, as well as the student has to grapple with the concept and use their own, relate it to themselves to be able to create. This is a great reason why integrating art in the classroom is usually good, because it's very personal to the student. And when we get to this level of understanding where students are able to create things, I really feel that my personal opinion is that they have mastered the concept. So the first one is I ask them to create something. And so some students, I always throw in like a, if not, then here's another one. Some students shy away from this creation portion of it. They're like, oh, I don't want to try, I'm intimidated. So that's where I have, something that's a little bit simpler, but still it exercises a different part of the brain. So in this part, with the creation part, we are exercising almost all parts of the brain and the student's experience. This asking them to build a circuit using schematics, this is exercising, this is creating an experience. So this is making the student, get tactile, should they choose to. I don't want to force my students to do these things, but should they choose to, this experience, this will create an experience for them. So they'll be able to see the components, link them together, and hopefully this will lead them into, because what happens after this is all of our lab examples moving forward will no longer have pictures of the components as they did before, but instead we'll only be using schematics. So it's a little bit of a preview. So hopefully take a look at the rest of the blog post, and hopefully that was as interesting for you as it was for me. Thanks.